Let's get going. First of all, who is Parker Dewey? Parker Dewey is a 10-year-old organization, 100% focused on college to career. We do this through the concept of experiential recruiting. It is a time-tested and proven approach where organizations are using these experiences to essentially improve recruiting outcomes. All we've done is made it accessible for early career hiring by removing all the friction, paperwork, and hassle. Again, making it easy for you to capture the data and drive your recruiting outcomes. And we'll talk about some of these things as we go through. The key takeaway here is this is not a newfangled thing, but something that is proven and complements the work you're already doing with the folks at Akron. As it relates to challenges, if we were live together, I'm sure I'd see some head nodding when we talk about this. Cost per hire continues to increase. According to National Association of Colleges and Employers, north of $6,000 per head, and that does not take into account any of the other costs associated, such as turnover, et cetera. It also doesn't take into account other points of friction that we continue to hear from those involved in campus recruiting, the last minute calls from hiring managers, the complaints about interviews, the scheduling, rescheduling, et cetera. On top of it, when hiring is done, about 50% of new hires leave within the first year, within early career. Sometimes it's because the organization realizes it's not the right fit. Sometimes it's because the candidate doesn't realize or realizes the organization's not the right fit. But the problem is huge turnover. On top of it, students are saying that the current process isn't effective for them. It's not effectively letting them explore career paths and demonstrate their skills, which is why we're seeing this turnover. What Parker Dewey does is allow you to tease these things out earlier in the process. So imagine before setting foot on campus at Akron, whether it's for a career fair, an info session, a class presentation, or interviews, having candidates engaged. Not just click, click, click a button, engage, but actually taking the time to express real interest. Imagine when you are on campus, being able to have meaningful discussions with the students, not rehashing what's on the website or getting the resume in the elevator pitch, but talking about the real type of work the students can and will be doing. Or after the event or the visit, being able to keep them engaged. We continue to see the data showing students aren't reading emails. They're not opening them. In fact, some of them are blocking. We see students aren't really interested in participating in the virtual info sessions. They're showing up if they already know they want to work just to get their name out there, but it's not keeping them engaged. And that's the juniors and seniors. What about the first or second year students, those students who are most interested in career exploration? How do you keep them warm in that period until you can offer them the summer internship? Imagine having insights on the actual interest of the students and their skills earlier in the process. Being able to know that Jeff, the student, is really enthusiastic about your company and he has the skills that align to what you're looking for. Not just the technical skills, but things like communication, problem solving, timeliness, grit, etc. And for those of you who can't be in Akron this year to recruit, being able to still reach the students and keep them engaged. You could be a local Akron company that, again, for whatever reason, you can't be on campus, but you could be a company based in Columbus or Cleveland or Indianapolis or Chicago. Being able to reach students who go to school at Akron from these locations and want to return home. This is not make-believe. This is experiential recruiting. Experiential recruiting is essentially the intersection of employer branding and skills-based hiring. Now, when we talk employer branding, this is not what kind of swag you have at the career fair, what t-shirts sort of your folks are wearing. We're talking about real branding. We're talking about helping students understand what your organization is like as an employer. We see big, well-known companies face this. Every college student knows what Nike is, but they're not necessarily thinking about Nike for roles in technology or AI or HR or strategy, or the Fortune 500 that's not well known, the company that makes tires. Again, students aren't thinking about that. Or those smaller businesses Those organizations that can't compete with the big guys with the fancy booths and everything else, how do you keep those students or reach those students and help them understand what your organization is like? The other part of it is skills-based hiring. This is a very hot topic. Skills-based hiring is all about assessing skills, not making decisions based upon academic pedigree, where someone went to school or major, GPA, or who their family is, but rather getting insights on a candidate's skills and understanding how they align to what your organization is looking for. It's also about mutual assessment of fit. Back to the earlier comment about that first year turnover, skills-based hiring teases those things out earlier in the process. This is all possible through the concept of micro-internship. Now, if we were together, I'd ask by a show of hands how many of you know what a micro-internship or have heard the term before. And if I had Zoom, yeah, I was gonna say thanks, Patrick. If I had Zoom skills, I would ask people to use the Zoom reaction thing, but since I don't, I'll spend a minute talking about how Parker Dewey defines micro-internships. Micro-internships are short-term, paid professional projects that can be done on demand, but allow you to get insights into a student and allow students to show the skills. These are 10, 20, 30-hour projects that are similar to the types of tasks that would be given to a new hire, fresh out of school, or a summer intern. Now, to be clear, these are not projects that require onboarding or training. These aren't projects that require you to share information or access to internal systems. These are the types of projects that someone can do using public info. And we'll talk about some examples. But again, the key is they're really, really short term. They can be done on demand. These are paid assignments, and they're paid for two reasons. One, it's just fair. And two, we found by paying, it ensures organizations have access to a breadth of students, not just those who are rich and can afford to do unpaid work or those who already decide your organization is perfect. Part of the goal of micro-internships is to drive that interest, and you want to reach that student with grit. That student that's working part-time to pay for books and can't afford to miss a shift and not be able to eat. We don't want to discourage them. We want to welcome them in. The other thing I'll highlight is micro-internships don't require a lift on your part. The students are employees or contractors of Parker Dewey for the duration of the project, so there's no HR or legal burden. And then to the extent it turns into a summer internship or a full-time role, no cost. There's no temp to perm, no conversion, etc. This also doesn't replace summer internships or full-time roles. As one of the college students described it, think about a summer internship or an apprenticeship or a co-op like getting engaged. Full-time role like getting married. These are job dates. Again, really, really great for those organizations trying to drive more interest, but also looking to assess skills. But as opposed to it being hypothetical, I'll show you some examples. So one of the things our team does at Parker Dewey is we'll take your job description, whether it's for an entry-level role, whether it's for an internship, or even just some bullets about what you have in mind, and we'll actually craft it into one of these micro-internships for you. So in this example, you can see on the left is the job description for the full-time role. They're looking for these types of skills. These are the responsibilities. Well, a perfect micro-internship might be creating or doing an analysis of competitive marketing campaigns, using public info. We're not giving access. What it's doing for you as an organization is not just engaging that student, but giving you insights into their skills. They could be the technical skills, like can they use certain marketing tools, but it's also skills like creative thinking and how well they present. Those skills that we know are so key to great hires, but they're also difficult to assess from a resume or even an interview. Another example is a project on or a full-time role that's on a manufacturing floor, production operator. Now, for a micro-internship, you're not going to let a student work with a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, but you might have them do a training manual development. Now, it's great if your organization actually needs that. Again, a double benefit of getting some work done and building a candidate pipeline. But even if you don't need it, when a student creates that training manual, they're demonstrating their technical know-how with that piece of machinery, but also, again, teasing out communication or critical thinking. It could be something in another technical role like development. In the same way, you're not giving them access to your app that's on the App Store selling millions of copies or your core code base that runs your organization, but let's have them do some user experience testing or research how AI is being used. All of these are examples of projects that are easy for you to provide and also offer those students these valuable experiences so they can demonstrate their skills. That's really core for employers, though, is that this whole process is an assessment. It's built into the process. When students are applying for micro-internships, you're able to see, are they a self-starter? Do they have real interest in your company or attention to detail? That's key because while we really value our relationship with Akron, we don't allow Akron or any other college to make micro-internships a requirement. They can certainly encourage and let students know, but every one of the students on the platform raises their hand and says, I want to work on your project, and commits a little bit of time up front. That's really, really important. So again, in that first step, you're getting insights. Now you select a student for a project. As they're completing it, you're getting more insights. How do they communicate with you along the way? Are they sending emails that are professional, or are they sending emails like I would send to my buddy Patrick? Are they turning it in on time? Are they taking time to understand your goals? And then from the finished work product, and I'll show you some examples, you're able to tease out their problem solving, intellectual curiosity, professionally. Every step of the way, you're getting more insights. But why do students do this? Well, they do it because 95% of them say this is how they want to be recruited. They want to work on these experiences to learn about organizations, to demonstrate skills, to determine what company is the right fit for them. And in fact, over 70% want to begin doing this during their first or second year. So as you think about your own recruiting process, very focused on bringing in the right summer interns who are juniors and the right full-time hires who are seniors, the real opportunity is also in those first and second year students, again, beginning to engage them. So I'm going to take a breath before I share how this aligns to your hiring strategy and some very specific ideas. Patrick, anything you want to add before we jump in?
Sorry, I needed a catch up. So no, I think it's wonderful. Parker Dewey is a great opportunity. I think we work with students every appointment when we see it, especially if it's an Akron employer, especially if it's like in person, those opportunities, we're always looking at the job board. We're always sharing to students and saying, how can we, especially if a student does not find a job or an internship for during the semester, it's, well, let's look at Parker Dewey. Let's look at something that is an alternative to working in fast food, not working at Chick-fil-A, not like finding something where they can build up. Even if it's not a skill for their major, it is a skill that it's a skill or skills that they can take on and are transferable. Since I've worked with a lot of students, well, not that many, but I've worked with a few students on their experiences in Parker Dewey recording, seeing their responses, how they like it. So it's something worthwhile, and it's the more that employers engage with Parker Dewey, the more that students are going to be engaging with it, since it's never just, well, I show up and do so. It's, well, the students want to see you. The students want to see you interact, which is the reason that when students, if you look at the data, students like to meet with people in person. Same with how employers want to meet with people in person. They want that interaction. They want to be hearing those constant responses, or they think you're going to be ghosting them. So Parker Dewey is an excellent platform to be able to get that across to students, I would say.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. You brought up so many important points. First of all, again, even for majors that don't sound like job titles, again, philosophy, English, history, students are developing really, really valuable skills that employers most value. Again, communication, problem solving, coachability, ability to learn and adapt. These are vital skills, and students are looking for ways to demonstrate them for employers. Second, one of the beauties about the micro internships is even for Akron based companies, about 97, 98% of these projects are remote. So this could be a project that a student at Akron who is taking classes full time can still complete for you, even if they're not on site, but it leads to that full time opportunity down the road. It helps the student realize that there's a great full time role for me in Akron. I don't need to go to Chicago or Boston or New York to do interesting technology. There are local companies right here that are better fits for me. So again, great sharing that. As employers think about where to put this into the process, again, we'll talk about a few different areas and then we'll walk through very specific examples. First, before you're visiting the school, as I alluded to, before the career fair, before the info session, what a great way of getting candidates or getting interest from students who are excited to attend. After the events, we'll talk about how micro-internships can be used to keep candidates warm. As you're evaluating, we all hear about the application avalanche and too many resumes and trying to guess. Again, we'll talk about how it can be used to assess, and then even if you can't visit campus this year. So the first example is with a preeminent healthcare organization. It's a hospital system, and they had two key challenges. One, massive competition for roles in allied health, think X-ray technician types of positions. Huge competition, huge shortage of students. Second issue was they were also hiring for roles beyond traditional healthcare. Just because it was a hospital system, they still had roles in accounting, HR, finance, marketing, and they weren't seeing enough interest from the students. So before visiting the campus, they were posting micro-internships, both around those allied health roles, but also those tied to HR and accounting and other areas. Here's what happened. Before they set foot on campus, they had a pool of students who were excited to visit their booth or their info sessions or their tables. And not just the allied health like they were always getting, but also some of those other areas. They also found that the projects became a real differentiator, not just, again, getting them to the booth, but instead of rehashing what's on the company's website or getting the resume and the elevator pitch, at those events, they were discussing these real micro-internships, these real projects, which were viewed as a differentiator by the student versus other healthcare companies. One of the other things that was interesting that this organization shared is it gave them insights on the students upfront, so they knew where to focus their time when they were on campus. Students with certain skills or geographic ties that aligned to their needs, and real insights on these skills before the event. And while this was focused on before showing up on campus, the same playbook works even if you can't be there. So what about after the events, or those students who express interest, but for whatever reason, you're not able to meet if you're not on campus? How do you keep them warm? This, as I alluded to before, could be the junior or senior during that period before the interview or offers are made, or it could be the first or second year student who's still in that exploratory phase. In both cases, we know students are not responding to generic emails. We also know they don't have interest in yet another webinar, no matter how interesting we think it is. So what this global medical device company did is they took another approach. They initially focused on high volume business development or sales roles. They were very, very hard for this company to fill for a number of reasons. One, they were looking for students with geographic ties to where they were located in Massachusetts and Texas and Tennessee and a few other places. They were also really interested in students with backgrounds in mechanical engineering and also student athletes. Now, when these students were engaged, when they were showing up to the career fair booth or applying or expressing interest, this organization did not want to lose them. So what we did for them was we created auditions that were tied to business development, where students were doing various types of research on different companies and products, and we crafted these specifically to keep those students engaged. But what it also did was it provided hiring managers with insights into their skills. So after the event, the students were invited to participate, and here were the results. First, from a traditional metric perspective, it knocked the ball out of the park, whether it was email open rates or click-through or participation. But what really mattered were those other metrics. They were able to quickly determine which of those students was the best fit, not based upon academic pedigree, but based upon real work, and help this company decide to focus on those candidates. As a result, from the class of the business development reps, 100% of them are still at the company a year and a half later. Hear me, 100. This is compared to typical 50% turnover of recent college grads during the first year. And for business development roles, that number is typically 70 or 80%. In fact, one of these students got an Employee of the Year award, and the hiring managers thought it was the greatest thing. In their words, they didn't waste time interviewing people who may not have been the right fit. And when they hired, they had confidence. And we'll talk about this in the next example. This company had a big challenge recruiting HR professionals. It had an incredible brand as a national fitness chain. It's a name we all would know. But most of the applicants they were getting were actually interested in roles at the franchise locations versus the corporate headquarters where they were recruiting for. As a result, this organization had stacks of resumes and were spending way too many hours flipping through. So what they did was they had hiring managers share small tasks that would come up throughout the year, think articles that need to be written, or job specs that need to get updated, or research that needed to get done. And like the first example that I shared, this provided an always-on pool of candidates. So while hiring managers appreciated the on-demand support, the campus recruiting team was building a pipeline for when it needed it. Now, in this one case we'll share, the learning and development team had a real project. They were looking to compare best practices for new hire onboarding. They selected 2 different students to do the project. One was a 3.9 from a highly selective school who was an HR major. The other student they selected came from a less prestigious school, didn't have as high as a GPA, and she wasn't an HR major. She was liberal arts. Here's what happened. Both of the students did the project, and I'm sure you can see where I'm going. The HR major was the example on the top. Their typos, grammatical errors, things that would be tough to see even from an interview. The other student, the one at the bottom, showed she didn't just have the technical HR skills, she was able to figure that out even as a liberal arts major, but she also had problem solving and communication skills. And one I'll point out just from looking at it was empathy. By looking at the deliverable, you could see pretty quickly how well she empathized with what a hiring manager would want based upon how she presented it. If you fast forward, she actually got hired for this company's summer internship and then ultimately a full-time role. And in the words of the hiring manager, this is someone we probably wouldn't have even interviewed based upon a resume. The last example is about data, whether or not you can be on campus, data to help you guide your decisions and data to help you demonstrate the effectiveness of your work, both externally and also internally. And this is really important right now as early career is under attack. This global Fortune 500 company had a relatively small campus recruiting effort, but they were not only trying to defend it internally, they were trying to scale it. So what they did was they focused on some of the strategic goals of the company. So for example, it was headquartered in DC, but they had offices all over the country and in some places that are smaller towns that may seem difficult to hire for. They were also focused on some of the strategic initiatives of this corporation, such as gender equity and STEM. So like the other examples I shared, we crafted projects that align to some of the roles and locations. And what's different here is they initially engaged the ERG. Here's what happened. First, they were able to reach the right candidates. Again, not just for the DC headquarters, but students with ties to Rockford or Texarkana or Holland, Michigan. They were also able to defend the cost internally. Now, they allowed us to share their cost metrics per school. One of the things they didn't allow us to share were their specific internal cost per hire, but they did allow us to share that it was a 70% cost savings per hire. And as I mentioned, this started with one of their ERGs. They saw immediate results, both with the candidate pools, but also the existing employees who expressed how happy they were. Again, in their words, they liked the fact it wasn't, we need someone like you to show up at an event, but they saw that diversity was real. What was also most impressive to me was almost immediately other departments wanted to participate beyond the ERGs. When does that ever happen with a recruiting effort? As a result, this program scaled across the country. Again, this whole approach works because it's easy for employers and it aligns to goals, whether it's the top of funnel. How do I reach students from Akron or the 5,900 plus other post-secondary programs? How do I gain insights onto their skills earlier in the process? How do I build relationships that lead to better conversion and retention? And the metrics show it works. Again, typically we'll see 40 to 80% cost savings on cost per hire with 98% plus first year retention. So what you get by taking this approach is obviously the individual projects, but all of these other benefits, whether it's around building your employer brand, whether it's around efficiency, whether it's around happier hiring managers, or cost savings, over and over and over again, this aligns. So the $1 million question is now, how do I get started? Well, there's 4 options for you. First, send us your job or internship description. You can use the link at the bottom or the QR code. We love to be challenged. Literally include a PDF of your job spec or a link or bullet points. We'll give you some examples. Second, you can tell us about some of your ideal candidates, what skills they have. Do you have geographic ties or other preferences or certain grad dates or other needs? We'll give you some suggestions. You can also share with us a recruiting goal or a challenge you're facing. We talk with a lot of organizations ranging from startups to Fortune 100. We're happy to share some of the best practices that we've seen in some of the insights. And then finally, think about a small task you have on your plate. We call them the we shoulds or I shouldn'ts. We should go see the job descriptions and how they compare to other companies, but we don't have time. Perfect micro-internship. Or I shouldn't be the one crawling around Akron's website trying to find the campus clubs. Well, perfect project for a micro-intern. So feel free to use the QR code or the link. We're happy to help. With that, I don't see any questions in the chat. Patrick, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, so thank you everyone that is seeing this. Anyone that wants to reach out, we will be sending this out once Jeffrey sends me this download for this. And if anyone has any questions, I can always I'm a good connection since I am the representative for the University of Akron Parker Dewey connection on the University of Akron. So I can always set up a call, set up an email, forward anything. And if you have students that are interested, or if you hear anything about hiring students for micro-internships, always willing to reach out.
Thank you so much. This completes the webinar, and we look forward to the follow-up. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.